Hello, welcome to Nancy and Nicole, Real Life, Real Talk. Today we are going to talk about those moments in life where something happens, whether it is a divorce or death or disease or some external event that leaves you feeling like, oh my God, my life is never going to be the same after this. And most of us have some event like that in our lives, sometimes multiple. And it is an intense experience. And we're going to talk about it a little bit today. Like how do we navigate when all the ground underneath us has just moved and it feels so unsure, uncertain
Yeah,
about who we are?
there's big moments in life for
Yeah.
sure. Kind of change you. What was one of yours?
Probably my first sort of snap moment was when my dad left when I was a kid.
Mhm.
It was the 70s. No, I didn't even know what divorce was, I don't think. Nobody we knew had their parents hadn't split up. And I came home one day and my dad had moved out.
Oh,
And
geez.
my identity about who I was the youngest. I took a lot of responsibility for stuff in our family. Who are the Chapins? And
Yeah,
what does that mean for how I saw myself in my family, what my relationship was with my dad? I mean, all of that just was never going to be the same again.
yeah,
That was probably my first really significant one that I remember.
yeah.
How about for you? Anything come to
Mm.
mind?
Well, you're talking about divorce. My parents got divorced, and it was kind of a long, drawn out process. But I still can remember to this day, like when it was all said and done, and they moved. This house was sold, and they moved, and both my sister and I were like, I just graduated from college, so I hadn't fully launched yet. So anyway, I ended up moving in with my dad to his
Mm.
place, and my sister moved into her mom's with our mom, not her mom, our mom. But I remember there was this traffic light where I was coming home from work that first night that we stayed in the new place. And at the traffic light, I would have gone right to the house that we all lived in. But instead, I went straight because now I was going somewhere else. And I just started sobbing. It's like that in that moment is when it all hit me. It's all different now. Of like, this is, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, it was a big moment.
Yeah. It makes me curious because from my experience, it's oftentimes just catapults you into a place of crisis
Hmm.
that you're so in the crisis management piece of it that it's hard. You may have that awareness of like, oh shit, life is never going to be the same,
Hmm.
but you don't have a hot minute to go, well, what does this mean for me and how I see myself? Like what my mom had a series of strokes and almost died and brain surgery and in a coma and all this stuff. And I was in my late 20s. I was the one who drove her to the hospital. And I remember going back to her house that night. They didn't think she was going to make it through the night. And I went back to her house, and, where her coffee cup had been left. The house was, a still life of what had been true for her hours before. And I had to feed the dog who's like wondering, why isn't anybody there? There wasn't a moment where I was like, what does that mean for me about
Right.
my relationship with my mom or my identity as a good daughter?
Hmm.
But I can tell you that there was a ripple effect from that experience and that moment of my mom's near death that lasted for 25 years. And I did get to that point of, after you get through the crisis part of it, she lived. And then there's more crisis of like, oh, she lived, but she's definitely not the same person she was. And now what do we do? I mean, all of those
Yeah.
pieces. But the shift of how I saw myself as a good daughter and what that meant got so entrenched in a particular version of me that I didn't feel like I had a lot of. Again, she lived like almost another 2 decades after that.
So we're talking about our kind of our snap moments.
Yeah.
Going back to the episode before, we were talking about, you just kind of go through these phases of life where something at some point you kind of pop up. It's like I just equate it to you're just kind of your head down, you're just living life. And again, it could be a really good life. This is not that any of this is bad or wrong, but there's something that causes you to lift your head up somehow, some way, and look around and just ask, is this the life I want? Again, it doesn't mean you got to torpedo the whole thing, but Is there more to it? All of those, what we're talking about. And a lot of times it's just kind of that doing of life. But what we're talking about in this episode are those specific moments, sometimes those trigger moments, whether it's a divorce or somebody passes away or something that you cannot help but reinvent yourself because what existed before is no longer an option. And so those snap moments that it's like a forced recalibration, whereas kind of what we talked about in the previous one was more of a softer noticing, whereas this one you're like, this is happening. You cannot
Although
pretend it's not.
I would argue that that slow drift
Mhm.
where that little voice in your head, because we just, swat it away like it's a gnat and like ignore it for oftentimes for a long time, that
Yeah,
gets louder and louder. And I think sometimes it just builds till we hit some snap moment where it's like you can't not see the fact that
very much so.
you feel so off course and disconnected from yourself. But yeah, but when an external event challenges who you are in your life
Right,
is a very different experience. It still takes you, I think, to the same for me, certainly
right.
felt took me to a similar place, but it doesn't even have to be like I had a huge aha when I, turned 60,
Mhm,
so very much external, and it was realizing I had way more years behind me than in front of me.
mhm,
That was this I'm not quite sure what shifted in my mind between 59 to 60, but somehow that was this aha, this awakening of like, shit her off the pot, Nance.
mhm,
What life is this that you want? I struggled a lot. I still struggle with giving myself permission and space to ask those questions and to long for feeling more aligned, feel
mhm.
like I recognize myself in my life because I have a great life.
For sure. Yeah,
I love my life. Are there ways that I want to make sure that I am living from that core,
yeah.
unchanging me self? Yes.
So what are some of the changes that like, what's one change that came out of a snap moment for you?
Well, I started doing public speaking again. I had done it
Yes.
like 30 years ago, loved it, had great momentum, and actually, it was probably shortly before that my mom had almost died, and so that sort of threw everything in my life off course. I could have gone back to it many times over the past 30 years, but that snap moment of turning 60 was like kind of shit or get off the pot. Like, what do you want to be doing? I don't want to be doing work that feels more meaningful and is around themes around authenticity and helping people feel like they can show up more as themselves in their lives. And so it was an absolute impetus for me to like, okay, so what would that look like? And
Yeah.
here we are having
There you go.
conversations that I would not have had prior to 60, I don't think.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. How about for you? Any snap moment that like you can think of that was like, oh, that sort of set things in a different direction?
My parents getting divorced. That's how I ended up in real estate, actually.
Mm,
So that was one. And yeah, I'm trying to think if there was one around starting to do more of my own teaching with energy work and the different things that I do. I don't know that there was a snap moment on that one, but
yeah.
I think it was more of a like, what do I have to lose? Let's just put it out there and see what happens. So,
Mm.
yeah.
And I think it makes me so curious about sort of the flow of internal experience and external world.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Oh,
I
so
be- well, I was just thinking about so I became a parent at 41.
yeah.
Um and that was a huge shocker of like,
Mm-hmm.
oh crap. Shifted me into a world of being responsible and I think I took on a lot of identity about what that meant to be an adult, somebody's
Sure.
parent.
Yeah.
And I think some of that identity and should of what that meant did not come from the inside. It was a lot of world expectations, family of origin stuff, I'm sure, and just my own stories in my head. But the reality is, we can't change everything overnight in our
No.
lives. There
No.
are constraints There are external factors, there's internal factors, and I think sometimes depending on the snap moment, there's a level of crisis that you're in. It's not always
Hmm,
about crisis, just to be clear. I
no,
think it's whatever that moment is that you can't ignore anymore, where there's a loss or a shift or just a realization that changes how you see yourself in your life.
right. Well, and I think it goes back to what you were talking about in a last episode that really, especially when you're in a moment where you just have to deal with whatever's going on, it all comes down to noticing and awareness.
Mm,
That is and it's okay. So, that's the beginning of it all, but also that it's okay. It's actually better to stay in that space for a while. It's like we all want to dip our toe into that and go, oh, that's really uncomfortable. Let's just fix it. It doesn't work that. And actually, you miss a lot of the gold because you do have to, you got to sit in it for a while
yeah.
of like, okay, what's really happening here? What am I feeling? What am I noticing? You can maybe even ask what you want to be different, but it's okay to just sit in that noticing for a while and give yourself grace and kind of, because there's always layers to it. It's never just a surface top thing. And I think that's a big part of, because otherwise, I think for a lot of people, myself included, I'm like, ooh, I'm noticing that. That's really uncomfortable. How can I just make it go away? And that's not how change actually happens.
And that's where our culture wants to sell us 50 million external fixes so that we don't have to sit
Right.
in some of that internal tension.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Why would
Yeah.
we do that? There's a pill, a shot, a this, a that, a everything.
So if our impulse is to fix
Hmm.
and make that tension go away, is there anything that you think supports how do you stay in it, but also not sort of spin yourself into a
Hmm.
little hot mess about it all?
Yeah. It's easier said than done.
That's why I'm
Depends.
asking the question. I'm hoping you don't turn around and ask me the same question.
So let's say what I would like my answer to be. And
There
some
you go.
days I show up, it's this, and oftentimes I do not. But when I am living as my best self, there's a lot of wisdom and gold in sitting in it. If I can do it from a place of grace. Again, whatever it is that I want to change isn't bad. It's not wrong. There's nothing to beat myself up for, punish myself for, all the things. But if I can just maybe go back to that 3-year-old me and
Mm,
realize I was doing the best I could at that moment in time. I'd like to do something different now. And I may or may not know what that is right now,
mhm.
but I know it's time for a shift. Can I just be curious about what's going on here? And sometimes I can get to that place and there's deep wisdom that comes out of that and awareness. And it takes a little bit. And it's interesting. It is easier for us to answer the question, what do we not want? Than
Mm,
to answer the question, what do you want? If you ask somebody, what don't you want? They usually have a whole, oh, I don't want this, blah, 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 and they can just whoosh for days. Well, what do you want? Well, not that. No, that's not what I asked you. What do you want? And it takes a little bit to get to that, especially because usually what we do want is something we haven't had before. So we don't actually know. And so it takes a while to really sit in that and uncover and also be okay with I don't know. So let's experiment. Let's try it. Maybe I want this and let's try it out. So that's who I want to be on a daily basis.
yeah,
There are many days quite honestly I'm not that person. But on my best days, that's who I am.
I think that's pretty normal. Yeah. Well, and I think for most people, there has not been a context or an opportunity where people intentionally go through some sort of process of reflecting about not only what do I want my life to look like that's really hard, but I don't think you can even get to that list until you go, so what are my values?
For sure. So
What
yeah, what's even
matters to
important to
me?
me? Yeah.
And what really matters to me as opposed to what I think is supposed to matter to me.
Yes. Which is also, it takes a little bit of uncovering. It seems like a super simple question.
No.
Blank slate. A lot of people, myself included, sometimes I'm like, I don't know. Let me get back to you on that one.
Yeah. I have found when I have been in situations, sometimes as a realtor, because I do bring some of my sort of coaching, used to be a therapist hat to that work, is really having people do some values clarification exercises, for lack of a better word, or reflecting. because it's really hard to make choices for the exterior part of your life if you aren't clear about, so what would that look like?
Right.
What values? And I worked with a coach years ago, a guy named Bill Mayer, really great guy. And he had a process that I've actually implemented taken some of his stuff and put it into the work that I do with people, which is coming up with some core values about what's how do you want to
Hmm.
live your life, sort of. But then the real gold is to then, as you're planning out your day, as some of us do when we're trying to be efficient and, live an intentional life, is to then go, okay, so what am I doing? What's in my calendar for tomorrow that actually has a direct correlation to these top five core
Right.
values? And if I don't have something that ties back to it, or if I'm doing stuff that doesn't, even in some circular way, tied back to a core value, why am I doing that?
Yeah.
And are all those things a direct reflection of those five core values? When you have those snap moments of upheaval in your life, my experience has been it's really hard to like get back on any sort of track of roadmap of this is who I am when something has just changed. Oh my God, clearly I'm never going to be the same again. Like I can't get back to that center unless I know what center is.
Right.
But who
So
of
how do you
us,
do that? Where do you go? I'm teeing this up. Where do you go to find your center? Because I don't.
well,
I also think it's something that's very difficult. I was going to say impossible. I suppose nothing's impossible. It's difficult to do on your own,
absolutely.
right?
And as I don't think we do. And I think
But if you wanted
we,
to, like, because you talk about this a lot in your groups, it's a
yeah,
cornerstone of what you teach.
it is absolutely. I mean, that's like it in a nutshell. Is like, I want to create a space for people to be able to show up in that discomfort of
Yeah.
like, I don't, again, I don't recognize myself in my life and I don't want to just stuff it and keep
Right.
staying in autopilot. Like I've managed the crisis piece of this
Hmm.
snap moment and but now I gotta just live my life.
Right.
Okay, I'm just gonna live it the way I have for the last 10, 20, 30 years, even though it's completely disconnected from what is true for me inside. So
Yeah.
instead, we've created this great private small group to be able to be with one another in those conversations and have some
Yeah.
framework. We do the goals or the core values clarifying
Hmm.
exercises and stuff to be able to sort of rebuild. It's not, you're not like blowing up your life and starting all over again. It's really about rebuilding or building a life that feels more true to actually who you are.
I love it. And I believe you can only have those in conversations with other people in
I
groups.
do too. Yeah.
There's something about the conversation, at least for me. It just like I can access information more deeply than if I'm just sitting there by myself filling out a little questionnaire.
Part of where some of this work comes from is me going back over 25 years worth of journals and
Yeah.
writing and watching this through line of struggle with it all and realizing, holy crap, if I'd had a framework and a community to have been able to hold me through this process, my 40s, 50s, early 60s would have been way different.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's the least we can do for each other is hold that space. So
Yeah. I love
if
that you're
that
having these
sounds like any
conversations.
of you listening to this, you know where to find
Check the
me.
show notes and
Show
send Nancy a note.
DM me, go to the link for cohort events down below, and I'd love to chat more about if this is for you.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for having the conversation today.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, you guys.
Absolutely.
See you on the flip side.
Bye.